Let's continue this conversation with former Israeli government spokesperson Eylon Levy, who's now joining us live from Tel Aviv. Eylon, it's great to have you on the show. I don't know if you could hear the guest I was just speaking to regarding the West Bank and the meeting between Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu, which is due to happen. What's your thoughts on what she had to say? Is the West Bank a red line for the US?
Yeah, I think your previous guest was absolutely right. Hamas sees this decision to recognize a Palestinian state that does not exist as a reward. But that's a point we really need to linger on, because it means Hamas feels vindicated by its decision to launch war nearly 2 years ago. Hamas believes that that decision has paid off. Hamas believes that everything that has happened in the Gaza Strip has been worth it to advance international recognition. And that means that we are going to see more barbaric atrocities and more terrorism from Hamas, because the UK, Canada, and Australia are telling Hamas terrorism works at exactly the moment that we needed international pressure on Hamas to agree to end the war by freeing the hostages and laying down its arms. These countries are telling Hamas effectively, I know they'd be aghast to think this is what they're doing, but they're telling Hamas to dig its heels in, and that if they keep fighting, they will get international rewards, and that terrorism works. It's a terrible, terrible decision that is only going to sabotage any hope of a ceasefire and the release of those hostages.
Eylon, that's not the question I asked you at all. You didn't answer my question.
So I'll get back to your question regarding the West Bank. Prime Minister Netanyahu has said that Israel's countermeasures will wait until after he comes back from the UN General Assembly. And there is pressure in Israel to announce the application of Israeli law to areas of Judea and Samaria, what you call the West Bank. And the reason for that is that Israel now has an urgent interest to protect two national interests. The first is to establish its control over territory that it regards as existential for its security. Let's remember, Israel without the West Bank is only 9 miles wide. Just last week, the IDF arrested a Palestinian terror cell planning a rocket attack from the West Bank. And if Israeli troops were not there, we would see rocket attacks from the West Bank, just like we saw from the Gaza Strip after Israel withdrew. There is consensus in Israel, especially after October 7th, that we can never give up security control of the West Bank, or we will see October 7th on a much larger scale. And the second interest that Israel has is to prove to Palestinian terrorists that terrorism doesn't pay, because Western countries have given them an incentive to continue waging jihad, and Israel now needs to balance that by sending another message that terrorism does not pay. It's going to have to try to find a way to undo the damage that Western countries have done now by emboldening and empowering Hamas.
Eylon, Israel's settlements in the West Bank are deemed illegal under international law. Far-right ministers, we have to look, Ben-Gvir and Smotrich, are calling for annexing the area after what you said is what Western key allies did by recognizing a Palestinian state. Is this revenge?
Well, Israel disputes the characterization of Israeli communities in Judea and Samaria, the biblical homeland of the Jewish people, as being illegal. It sees no reason why 19 years of an illegal Jordanian occupation from 1948 to 1967 means that Jews are not allowed to live in the Jewish quarter of Jerusalem or anywhere else in the area of Judea, which is where the word Jew literally comes from. But there will certainly be calls now for countermeasures, absolutely, to show Western countries that they cannot embolden terrorism, they cannot undermine Israeli security and expect there to be no response, because otherwise Israel will find other countries transgressing against its vital security interests, when Israel's key interest now is to establish security after a regional war that has seen our country attacked on 7 fronts.
Okay, Eylon, I hear you, but the reality is around 160 states do recognize a Palestinian statehood. There is a big international move in this direction because of Israel's actions inside Gaza and the E1 settlement plan. I don't know if you see if that's what these Western nations say they are trying to do through their speeches. They're saying they're not supporting Hamas. They want a two-state solution. What does Israel want to end this? Can you see that these countries are desperate to help the starving people inside Gaza?
Well, Western countries can say they're not supporting Hamas, but the fact is Hamas sees this as a vindication of its strategy to go to war. The fact is Hamas sees recognition as a fruit of the October 7th massacre. And if it thinks it's picking fruits, it's going to sow another harvest. Keir Starmer said this decision means that Hamas can have no role in the government of a Palestinian state. I have no idea how he would jump to that conclusion when the fact is that Hamas is not only the most popular political actor in Palestinian society, its support has more than doubled since the October 7th massacre because it is seen as delivering rewards. So Western countries, I'm sure, will be aghast to think that they're supporting terrorism, but in practice, they are emboldening and empowering Hamas. Now, the Israeli people want peace. We've had enough of war. This is the longest war in Israel's history. But peace is not going to come by making concessions that endanger Israeli security. It's not going to come by vindicating Hamas's decision to go to war. Peace will come through the total destruction of Hamas in Gaza, the demilitarization of Gaza, and the de-radicalization of Palestinian societies. So the jihadi ideology that many people celebrated October 7th has no place. But for that to happen, it has to be clear that Hamas has lost the war it declared on October 7th, and it has to free the hostages. And if this war ends with Hamas still in power and with hostages still in Gaza, that's not going to lead to peace. It's going to lead to another war in Gaza in a few months or years down the line, because we will be stuck with the jihadi regime that is sworn to Israel's destruction on our doorstep. For the sake of peace, Hamas has to go.
According to reports, Hamas is sending a note to President Donald Trump, and they will offer to hand over half of the hostages in exchange for a 60-day ceasefire. Will Israel agree to this? But also, Eylon, just another question. I've seen a lot of people speaking about Israel's want to eradicate Hamas, but can they eradicate the ideology?
So Hamas needs to free the hostages immediately and unconditionally. What we have now is not a negotiation, because there's nothing legitimate about holding hostages. We have kidnappers demanding a ransom, trying to extort a ransom. And Israel wants to get all the hostages out. There is a fear that if it accepts a ransom to get half the hostages out, it would doom the rest of them. There's no reason for Hamas to hold on to them, and we need international pressure on Hamas and its backers to get all of the hostages out immediately and unconditionally. But the opposite is happening now, because Hamas is being given reasons to keep holding on to those hostages. And I'm sorry, the second part of your question?
And a lot of people, Eylon, have been speaking about Israel eradicating Hamas, and that being the idea, and that being the mission. But also, how many questions have been asked, do you eradicate the ideology of Hamas? Because as you said to me, Hamas's support has actually grown inside of Gaza.
Yeah, Israel's goal is to remove Hamas from power and to destroy its military capabilities, not necessarily to eliminate Islamism and jihadism. In the same way as a coalition of 70 nations fought to remove ISIS from power in Syria and Iraq, reducing Mosul and Raqqa to rubble, in much the way that parts of Gaza look now, not to defeat jihadism, but to remove it from power so they cannot have a geographic base from which to plot attacks against Israel. And that's what Israel wants to do now. It wants to do to Hamas in Gaza what the world did to ISIS in Syria and Iraq. As for defeating Hamas's ideology, the only way that is going to happen is if it is proven that its ideology failed. If it's accepted that Hamas lost, that Hamas is responsible for the destruction it brought on Gaza by declaring a needless war and fighting that war from a network of tunnels underneath people's feet. But if this war ends with more international recognition and with Hamas thinking that it was rewarded and vindicated, that's not going to remove Hamas's popularity. That's going to increase Hamas's popularity. So all countries, European, Arab nations that want to fight against Hamas's toxic jihadi ideology need to make sure that Hamas loses the war that it started and that it knows it lost the war that it started, because if it thinks it's getting rewarded, it will be empowered and it will do this again and again.
Eylon Levy, it's always a pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you for joining us.